Hey everybody, it's your friend Adam. I'm here with Drew Welty and Tom Jump, and we're going to be talking about objective morality a bit. Our debate question is I don't unfortunately how our debate question is objective morality impossible without God? So Drew is going to be making the argument that objective morality is impossible without a belief in God, and Tom is going to be countering that argument. Just a little housekeeping here in the beginning. Next week I'm actually going to be debating myself. The question is going to be, is secular morality better than Christian morality, which will be along the same kind of theme, I think, as this. And then on the 24th, I'm going to be debating Kent Hovind on can evolution explain morality? And obviously, Kent Hovind is a creationist, so he doesn't think that evolution can tell us anything about morality. So that should be interesting.
So you said you were going to debate yourself. Is that right?
I'm debating myself. What do you mean?
Is that you said
That's what you said. Yeah.
you said you're debating yourself?
Oh, I am debating. I am going to be debating uh, uh, myself next week. I'm actually going to be debating Sarah is who I'm going to be debating. So
Oh, okay.
I just mean I'm not going to be moderating next week. So
Oh, okay.
obviously,
So I myself am going to be debating.
yeah.
Okay.
But I
You're
should
debating my
do.
alter ego.
I should actually debate myself sometime just to see
Just
if I
like
can do it. Just to see if I can maintain character. So
you
Be
have to
hilarious.
you have to use your old and new logo if you do that.
yeah.
So you have them side by side.
So before we get into this, I had given I did a debate before where I moderated, and I tend to interject a bit when I moderate, and sometimes it comes off as 2 against 1. So I did offer Tom the ability to come on with another person, so we would have even numbers if I interject. Tom has didn't want to do that. So I am going to try, and instead of interject, I'm going to try to just form questions. So during the question and answer period, I can just ask questions that'll get at the point that I want to make. And if you want to at me in the chat with any questions, I'll keep track of them and ask them during the question and answer period. So Drew, you have the floor. You can go first. I'm not keeping strong time, but if somebody talks for a long period of time, I will interrupt and get us back on track. If someone goes off topic too much, I'll get us back on topic. So Drew, the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. So first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this, and I think the first thing I'm going to do in this conversation is kind of give some not objectives, some definitions, because frankly, this conversation has a tendency to get derailed on what objective versus subjective means. So I'm going to give a couple definitions. I'm going to give the definition of objective, subjective morality. I'm going to give the definition of objective morality. I'm going to talk about a distinction that I think is important for the definition of objective morality, and then we'll kind of go from there. I'll talk a little bit about also why I think that it's not possible to have objective morality without God. So the first thing I'm going to define here is subjective morality. Or not subjective morality, just subjective by itself. So subjective, in my opinion, are those things that are preference oriented. They're mind dependent. So if you and I go to a art gallery and we look at a piece of art, and I say that this is the best piece of art I've ever seen, and you say this is the worst piece of art I've ever seen, I don't believe that it's the case that either of us is correct or wrong, because you're talking purely about subjective things. Those things are dependent upon our minds. My definition of objective are those things that are not mind dependent. So if I tell you that 2 plus 2 equals 4, it doesn't matter what you think about 2 plus 2 equaling 4. It's just the case that it is in fact that a fact that 2 plus 2 does actually equal 4. So I know that there are some different definitions of objective, but that is the one that I believe is as most efficient for the way I'm talking about it. So yeah. The next thing I'm going to do is define morality. I actually took this definition of morality from one of my opponent's videos, so hopefully we don't get off in the weeds about what morality means, because this is technically his definition. So Morality is the principles or criteria used to judge what is right and wrong. I think that it's a good place to start because there may be more to that, but I think this is a good baseline at the very least for talking about morality. So, in terms of my definition of objective morality, I would say that those are moral facts that are independent from the mind, are true, independent of what people think of them. So it would be the case that morality is objective if it's the case that I go and kill somebody, and it doesn't depend on what you or I think about it to determine if that thing is wrong or not. So if morality was subjective, it would be such that if I killed him, it would be only the case that we kind of have quabbles about our preferences towards what I did and maybe why it's wrong, but like it's not actually grounded in anything. The distinction I want to make here before I move on to why I think God is necessary to ground morality is that there's this thing that I like to call objective guidance within subjective axioms that happens a lot with atheists, is that they say, well, the axiom that I'm operating on is subjective, but once we're operating in this axiom, we can make objective judgments towards the different behaviors that we're talking about. So you may say it's the case. Matt Dillahunty actually said this in a video recently, or not recently. It's a video I recently watched. Here's actually a quote. The foundation of morality, as I mentioned already and already conceded a minute ago, is subjective, but assuming we agree on well-being, we can then make non-subjective assessments of the consequences of our actions. So this is different than what theists are talking about when we're talking about objective morality. I think it's perfectly fine for you to say that we have once we're operating within an axiom, let's say that well-being is good or something like that, or we should operate in a situation where we should try to promote well-being of humans, then you can sort of make objective judgments about what's actually objectively the case that it's bad for well-being if you were to chop my head off or something like that. That's not what we're talking about. I think that that's perfectly fine. I just don't think that you can actually it's not grounded in anything. It's a subjective way to it's not grounded. It's not objective. It's just you've decided on this axiom and then you move on, right? So my point is that creates a situation where it's still the case that even though you can make objective claims about morality and the way that you've defined it, you're not actually making objective moral claims. You're just kind of making claims within your moral community. And I think that that's a problem. And that's the problem that theists are trying to address when they are talking about objective morality. So I believe that it's the case that in a secular world, there are no moral facts. That's primarily because we would live in a physical world, and facts are not in the same universe essentially as normative and descriptive claims, basically. So if you're talking about descriptive claims, we're living in a world of descriptive claims. Normative claims are just simply preference in that universe. So I would say that in order for a subjective claim, like a moral claim, to be grounded, it would have to be essentially grounded by having a God decree that there's some sort of moral fabric to the universe. Otherwise, you're just talking about personal preference. Beyond that, you are in fact only talking about preference. It's not the case that take the art example. If God for some reason decreed that there was actually an objective standard for beauty, then it may be the case that people can actually be right and wrong about what is beautiful. But as we know of right now, it's just subjective. So that's basically my position, is that in order to ground a subjective position in an objective way, it would require a God to do that. And it's a simple position, but that's basically what I'm arguing. There's a lot of reasons why I think it's important that that's the case, but that's basically my position in a nutshell. So yeah, I'm happy to give the floor to Tom.
Tom?
All right. Yeah. So I'm going to object to his definition of objective and subjective a little bit. It's not mind dependent and independent. It's opinion dependent and independent. Like, for example,
That's fine.
I see the color red. That's dependent on my mind, but it's still objective. Like, I mean, I don't get an opinion on what the colors I see. It's a fact about the world. It's objective. So
That's fine.
Opinion dependent, independent. All right. I agree that morality, for it to be objective, is something that has to be true independent of opinion. But there are lots of different ways to get this. You don't need a God. For example, morality can be an undiscovered law of nature. If there was a law of nature that grounded morality that existed independent of our opinions, that would be an objective basis of morality. So yeah, morality can definitely exist without a God in that sense. It's clearly logically possible. Another would be a Platonic object. You can have Platonic morality, where morality exists as some kind of Platonic abstract that exists in the ether and that exists independent of our minds. So that would be an objective model of morality. Or you can have an abstract ideal like the triangle. Triangles don't actually exist, but we can use the abstract idea of a perfect triangle as a description, and we can use the abstract idea of a perfect morality as a description. So that's another way morality can be objective. There are numerous models of morality in philosophy and ethics. Most philosophers are ethical realists. So it's above 50% of philosophers are ethical realists, which means they believe in an objective morality, even though about 73% of philosophers are atheists. So even though most philosophers are atheists, they still believe in objective morality. You don't need a God for objective morality in ethics. It's just not a requirement. And there's dozens and dozens of ways in philosophy to get this. Secondly, God-based morality isn't objective. It's subjective. It's based on God's opinion. As my opponent noted in the beginning, he says moral claims are based off of a decree by God. Well, a decree by God is God's personal preference. And as my opponent stated in the very next sentence, if you're talking about a personal preference, it's not objective. So even with a God-based morality, that's subjective because it's based off of personal preference. And so the only way to have an objective morality means it has to be opinion independent, including of God's opinion. So that's essentially my position.
Okay, 1 second. That was a lot, so I'm trying to write this down so I figure out I can address everything. So, okay, so first, I'm not really sure why you listed the percentages of philosophers that were. I mean, that really has no bearing on.
I'll explain it. The people who know the most about the field of ethics and morality, who understand it more than anybody else, and who spend their lives devoted to studying the field, most of them understand that, or have a belief in objective morality, and they ground it in things other than a God. So the people who are most qualified in this field ground objective morality outside of a God. Now, whether or not you want to accept that or not is up to you, but there's pretty good reason there to think that, yeah, we can ground objective morality without a God.
Okay, I mean that how is that anything other than an appeal to an authority, right?
In science and philosophy, the highest authority is consensus. That's usually what we go based off. I can't actually do physics and go test the electrons. We trust the authorities. That's how science works. It's based off of
the highest. Wait, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? The highest authority in science is consensus.
Correct.
How is that the case?
It's just a fact. You can just Google the consilience in science. It'll just state it. Philosophy of science.
Why does consensus matter in science? Isn't it just the fact that something is true or it's not true? It doesn't matter how many people believe it's true.
Well, this is a little off topic, but no. If you Google Quine's web of belief, there isn't such thing as just truth, bare truth. You have to interpret it in the context of facts, but that's a different topic.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I'm gonna just dismiss the philosopher point. I don't think it's relevant. That's fine. I mean, we can disagree about that. I don't think that science really has a lot to do with consensus. Maybe we can work our way towards truth with consensus and like refer to experts, but frankly, I don't think that it's the case that you can just say a lot of people believe X. I mean, there's all sorts of psychological reasons they could believe that. I'm not going to go into that because it's going to go way up in the weeds.
Right. My only point here is just that the experts in the field believe you can definitely ground morality without a God.
Let's jump in and try to steelman each other's positions to begin with. Tom, do you have a firm grasp of Drew's position? Can you steelman his position? I'm a little unclear on how his moral framework is dependent upon God. He didn't really mention God in his opening, so.
Right. I mean, I could make a guess based off of my understanding of most theists, but I believe his position is something that, in order to have morality, it needs to be grounded in some kind of a mind and a lawgiver, something like that. I would believe is what he would say.
No, I think that if you're going to make a subjective fact an objective fact, you would need a God to do that.
How so?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not simply that it's not simply that I'm sorry, what did you say my position was? It doesn't bear any resemblance to mine, so could you just repeat it for me?
Sorry. Yeah, my general understanding of most theists is that in order to have an objective basis of morality, you need a lawgiver. The morality needs to be grounded in a mind, and so it needs to come from a mind, which is what they think God is.
I'm not sure it needs to be grounded in a mind. I mean, you may need a lawgiver, but I'm not sure it has to be grounded in a mind necessarily. I'm not.
All right,
I'm
so
not
tell me what your position is.
All I'm saying. Okay, so if we talk about a couple different types of objective facts, like if there are like necessarily existing objective facts, and then there are like contingently existing objective facts. So like it might be the case that it's objective in every possible universe that you can't have a square circle, right? So it may just be a necessarily existing truth that you can't have a square triangle. But it's not necessarily the case that like the acceleration due to gravity has to be exactly what it is. We could live in a universe where that is not the same way. And all my point is that I think morality is similar to like the acceleration due to gravity. It would be a law that God would impose upon the universe, and thus it's still objective that the acceleration due to gravity is what it is. It would just have to be it would just have to be created in such a way that that's the case. And so that's my point, is really that you would require a God to create this moral fabric of the universe. I don't think that it has to come from a mind or anything like that. I don't.
Okay, so if the universe was created without a God, for example, pantheism, where it's just an eternal, all-powerful universe, then that pantheism can have a law with like gravity, which is just a moral law. So now we have an objective morality without a God, right?
How would you get a subjective standard from an objective standard in just an empty universe?
No, so we have the universe. The universe is eternal, all-powerful, just like God, but has no consciousness, no mind. One of the laws of the universe, like the law of gravity, you know, it affects everything. It's physics. There is another physical law of nature, which is a moral law. It's just a law of nature we haven't discovered yet. So it exists like gravity and affects our brains in such a way that we feel this moral nature. But it exists physically as a part of the universe.
Okay, can you describe a way to me that that's separated from human psychology? Because I'm having a hard time understanding how we could have a moral fabric in that way.
So
Because
gravity,
like you're talking about intuitions right now.
no, I'm saying
Yeah,
humans don't matter. Life doesn't matter. No minds matter. I'm saying morality is a law of nature, like gravity. It's a physical thing, like electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear force, like a law of nature. It's a physical thing. It is a part of the universe itself. It's just one we haven't discovered yet.
So you're saying that moral laws could be physical.
Correct.
Could you describe to me how that could be the case?
It just can be the case. There's no logical contradiction.
Okay. Yeah. So
You would have to point out a logical contradiction. There's no logical contradiction, which means it
I'm not
can't
saying there's a contradiction. I'm trying to understand what that would even look like. Like you're talking, like how is murder is wrong, that claim? How is that a physical thing?
It could just be a law of nature which causes us to feel this.
But
So
our intuitions about morality are driven by evolution. Why would we feel this way because of?
Right, I'm saying it could be the case that they're not driven by evolution. They're driven by this law, which then affects evolution. So again, my goal here is just to say here is an alternative possibility where objective morality can exist without God. That's it. That's all I need to show here.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to state that this is kind of the pie in the sky stuff that I was referring to prior to this conversation. I was concerned that we were going to go here rather than talking about objective moral systems, but that's fine. If we want to have this conversation, that's fine. Okay,
I'm still unclear. Like, I'm comfortable in the objective moral systems thing. Tom is saying that you can have an objective moral system without a God. I don't necessarily know. I'm not sure that I'm fully aware of Tom's position or your position, Drew. If you have a moral system that has rules that are objectively part of the natural universe that we will all, like every community would agree upon, how is that set of rules necessary? How is a God necessary to that set of rules, Drew? What is your argument there?
Okay, so basically what I'm saying, I'm saying within a natural world, how do you get a moral framework? Like it's not clear to me that you can have a force like gravity, but just shift that to like murder is wrong, rape is wrong. What is that? Like, how does that exist within a natural universe exactly? Like, I mean, my point here is that you're talking about something metaphysical at this point, are you not? I mean, like, yeah. So like, it doesn't appear to me that you can just say that it's this, like you can have a big bang and then all of a sudden amidst all the molecules, there's murder is wrong.
The statement "murders is wrong" is describes something, and it describes it's a language description. It's irrelevant to the statement. I can say morality itself, the essence of morality, can come from a law of nature, and murder is wrong is a statement that describes what that essence is. So, like, murder is wrong wouldn't describe God's nature, right?
I mean, you could. I guess you could. I would have to think about that more. But I mean, if you start talking, that gets into like what is God like, though, right? I mean, like, do you want to go down that road?
Sort of. So God has some nature, and what morality is like God's nature, right?
I think God's nature informs what he would say. He would God's nature informs what he would declare as morality. Sure.
Can God declare something immoral as moral? Can God lie? Can God tell people to do immoral things?
I don't think God can lie.
Okay, so and so he can't lie, which means he's determined by his nature. His nature causes him to decree certain things and not other things, right?
Sure.
So his nature is what defines morality. His nature then tells him what he's going to decree, but his nature is what defines morality, correct?
Sure, why not?
All right, so we just get rid of the decree. Now we have pantheism. We just have a nature, and the nature defines morality, and it's just a part of the naturalistic pantheism. So we have the same. It works the same way that God does. We just get rid of the decree.
I think it actually helps. Could you define pantheism for me really quick? I want to make sure we're thinking about the same thing here.
So naturalistic pantheism is just is an eternal, all powerful universe, just with the God's properties without the consciousness.
Okay. So it's the God's properties without the consciousness.
Pretty much.
Okay. I mean, let me think about that. Actually, I don't think I've considered that then. So,
like, we'll just give you a better understanding.
Yeah,
like, God's properties are eternal, all powerful, all knowing, all loving, personal, conscious. Essentially.
Sure.
You can change out those properties. For example, if you get rid of personal, you get deism, where you get just an impersonal God.
Yeah.
If you get rid of personal and conscious, you get pantheism, which is just the eternal, all powerful universe. And you can get polytheism with many gods, or transtheism, where there's something above a god, or you can get Pastafarianism with the spaghetti monster. There's lots of different ways you can play with those traits to get a lot of different alternatives. And the one I'm going with here is just the eternal, all powerful universe.
Eternal, all powerful universe.
With the moral law, yeah.
With the moral law.
Tom, how are you defining your objective moral framework? Because it seems to me you have the same problem on your side.
You're correct. So,
Yeah.
Adam, the point you're bringing up is that the theist definition of objective isn't objective. They claim it's objective, but it's not. There's some big, massive problems with their definition. And I'm just going to assume they're right and adopt the exact same definition they're using. Now, I agree with you that it doesn't actually work, but I'm going to, because they think it does work, I'm just going to adopt that same position, even if it doesn't work, and use that as a basis to show there's an alternative. But your question leads into the fact that the theist position of objective morality isn't objective. A God decreeing a morality doesn't give us an objective morality.
Right. And what does? But you're saying you've claimed before in other videos and other debates that you have a secular version of morality that is in fact objective.
Correct. I use an abstract ideal kind of perspective of objective. So I use a completely different approach entirely. But right now I'm just addressing the topic of debate.
But since it definitely overlaps with what we're talking about, can you lay out that argument for us, and maybe Drew can attempt to steelman that argument?
That takes like 20 minutes to go through that argument. Like, so that's a really tough argument. But
give us the tweet version.
Tweet version. So my position of objective morality is the description of the best of all possible worlds for all possible wills. So if we can give a description, an abstract description of what the best of all possible worlds could look like for everyone, that would be an objective basis of morality.
Would it be for everyone, or would it be like utilitarian? Would it be for most people?
No, it'd be for everyone, including Hitler. Everyone.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And so if we can give like an abstract description of the perfect triangle, like we can't actually draw a perfect triangle, because if we zoom in to the electrons are going in little bubble shapes. It's literally impossible to draw a perfectly straight line. So it's absolutely impossible for us to draw a perfectly straight triangle. but we can use the abstract idea of this perfect triangle to get as close as possible in the world we can. So we use this abstract idea of the best of all possible worlds as a guide to get as close as possible as we can, given our pragmatic limitations in this world.
Right. So, but this would involve something like genetic engineering or something like that, because obviously you have jobs that people don't want to do, but you're theoretically making a universe where they're happy doing those crappy jobs that nobody wants to do. Is that what you're going for?
No, this would be more like the Matrix, where everybody gets your own universe. You can do whatever you want with it.
Right. Okay. So even though the people doing the shitty jobs perceive themselves as being high status individuals, that's the scenario.
No, the best of all possible worlds for all possible worlds is one where every single person gets their own universe. They get to do whatever they want with it.
How is this? How would this? I mean, abstracts are great, but how is this practical in the real world?
We use the ideal to try and get as close as possible as we can. For example, stoplights, by my definition, would be immoral because you're forcing people to stop without their consent. And so if we get to the technological point where there's no longer a consequence to getting rid of stoplights, they would become immoral, and so we should get rid of them. So if we go ahead like AI cars that could drive without stoplights, it would be immoral to make people use stoplights because it doesn't save lives anymore. Or if we had a way to feed all humanity without eating meat, it would no longer be moral to kill animals because it's an unjustified imposition on the will of the animals. So we can use this to say, as we gain in technology, we should allow each individual as much freedom as possible, so long as they don't impose on the freedom of others or something like that. It's a really complicated argument. Still want to stick to just the topic of the debate for a little bit longer.
Drew?
No, yeah, we can do that. No, yeah, we're fine. Like I said, I'm not entirely focused on winning here. I wanted this to be productive, and I told you before we started, I thought this is where it's going to go. Yeah. So in terms of the pantheism thing, I mean, if you want to say that that there's an all-powerful, could you give me the other trait really quick?
All-powerful eternal universe.
All-powerful and eternal universe. So it's basically God without consciousness, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
All right. So yeah, if you're willing to grant that, because that wouldn't qualify as a God by most definitions, because it doesn't have the consciousness. But if
that's fine, dude.
Okay, cool.
No, I'm like I told you, I'm not here to like if it takes me conceding this point for us to move to something more grounded, I'm fine to do that.
All right.
Like
all right.
like I want to have a discussion about morality and objective morality. I don't want to have a discussion about pantheism and its ins and outs, frankly.
All right,
I understand I understand why you're going down this route. I thought this was the most effective route to talk about why morality can't be. I disagree with your point about God. If God created it, what you're saying is it's if God created morality, it's contingent upon God, right? So it's not necessarily existing. This is what kind of my point of bringing up. So is it objectively the case that the acceleration due to gravity is what it is?
Yes.
Yes, but it could have been different.
Correct.
So the fact that it's contingent does not make it subjective.
Correct.
That's what I'm saying about morality. God could have created the same type of law that is the same type of thing that governs the acceleration due to gravity, but just because it's contingent does not necessarily mean it's subjective. That's my point.
All right. So just the reason I brought up the pantheism was just to show that there are different ways to have an objective morality without a God. For example, like an undiscovered law of nature, or like a Platonic object, or like an abstract ideal. So would you grant that point? There are other ways to have objective morality.
There are other ways to have objective morality if you are ascribing to some sort of distorted view of you're basically what you're talking about is a God without consciousness. I mean, because the main work being done by God here is the all-powerful part. Would you agree? If you're saying that,
well, from your perspective, most theists would disagree. Most theists think the consciousness is the most important part, from my perspective. But I'm okay with granting that. So
my main point is that it's turning a subjective into an objective is the part I'm concerned with. The fact that it's conscious, I'm not really sure. I'm concerned with creating a subjective claim and turning that into an objective one by some sort of action by the universe. If you want to call it the universe, that's fine.
Okay. So are you familiar with Platonic objects?
Forms, yes.
Okay, so a Platonic object is an object that exists. It exists independent of our opinion, so it would be objective, correct?
Sure. I'm not well versed in Platonic forms. Are they necessarily existing?
Um, the way you use necessary and contingent is kind of strange to me. In philosophy, they're used in a slightly different way. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that.
Could they? Okay, so if something exists necessarily, it could not exist. Is my point, right? Am I misunderstanding something about the word necessarily existing?
It usually doesn't go with existing. There's no such thing as a necessarily existing. There are necessary truths and contingent truths, but they aren't necessarily existing truths. Those don't go together. So, like a necessary truth is like all squares have four sides. A contingent truth is
Hmm.
all bachelors are under 9 feet tall.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. But do you don't think something could exist necessarily? You think that, because
No,
there are discussions about that in philosophy. I've had them with doctors. I mean, like
correct. The
PG. Yeah.
consensus in philosophy right now is that no, existence is not a predicate. You can't have a necessary existing thing.
That's okay. Once again, you're appealing to consensus here. That is not like
Right.
just
People who
because
understand the terms. Yes, that's right.
people who understand the terms. Okay. Look, I've this existence is not a predicate thing. Like I've talked with people with PhDs in philosophy who disagree. I'm just saying that consensus here does that you've appealed to consensus twice. I don't think it's relevant.
I'm sure you don't, but it is. I mean, if you don't realize it, that's fine, but it is.
Okay,
So
if one person thinks something and it's the truth, does it matter what everybody else thinks?
if you could get to the truth, no, but we can't get to the truth. So we have to go on probabilities. But going back to the point again, so Platonic objects exist independent of our minds, which makes them objective. Because again, if we go back to our definition of objective, it was something that exists independent of opinion, correct?
Sure.
So if a Platonic object exists independent of our opinion, then it's objective, correct?
Sure.
And morality can be a Platonic object, which is one of the common arguments in philosophy. So that would make it objective, correct?
Sure.
Okay, so there's two ways to have a morality without a god. One is with pantheism, one with
I'm not sure that Platonic objects could exist without a god, but I mean, like, again, I understand what you're saying. I'm having a hard time, like, I'm having a hard time understanding how objects that are like so. You're saying that there's something physical in the universe that is that is the form of a perfect triangle.
Yes, that's what Platonic forms are.
Yes, that's what I was clarifying. Yeah, I guess my question is, do you think it's reasonable to believe that that's the case?
No, this is just an example of what's a possible alternative of an objective morality.
I'm
I'm not
Yeah.
actually a Platonist. I'm just going through different possibilities here.
Yeah, it's also possible we're made of cheese, right?
Yes, it's possible we're made of
Yeah.
cheese.
Okay. Yeah. This. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. This is. Yeah. Okay. So this is essentially what I was saying when I was not concerned about. Okay. So what basically what I'm concerned about is the implications of objective moralities in terms of people believing in God or whatever. Now, I understand that the topic of the debate was phrased in such a way that we are actually talking about whether or not it's the case that, like, we're essentially talking about infinite possibilities here, and we're hanging our hat on almost anything is possible. There are things that are, I mean, like, we're talking about the things that exist in the way. So like the things that are exist objectively and also necessarily, like necessary truths, like square a triangle can't also be a square. I mean, those are the things that we're having a conversation about. Like, if
Right.
morality isn't like that, then it doesn't exist in the way that I'm talking about, right?
So the point I'm making is that your belief that a god has a basis of objective morality is equivalent to Platonic objects having a basis of objective morality, which is equivalent to an undiscovered law of nature being a basis of objective morality. None of these are more or less reasonable to believe. They're all equivalent. There are lots of different ways to ground an objective morality. They are all equally, I would say, unreasonable to believe in this case.
Okay.
What
Right.
makes them objective, Tom?
That's a really good question, Adam.
Well, you're saying that there's multiple objective moralities. That's like saying that there's multiple, distances of the Earth to the sun. It's just that's not the case. The whole idea behind
Right.
objectivity is that.
So the way theists define objective leaves open the possibility to get objective morality from many different things. Now, I don't
How
agree.
are you saying that they define objective?
Independent of our minds, so mind or opinion independent kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
So there are things like morality can exist independent of our opinions in many different ways. Now, I don't actually agree that that necessarily makes it objective morality. Like, I don't agree that a God-based morality is objective, but we can use that definition and accept it and show that it doesn't work because there's lots of different ways to do it. So, again, just my main point here is that based off the theist definition of objective morality, let's just grant it, let's say it's true whether or not it works or not. We can use that same definition and come up with many different alternatives to ground objective morality independent of a God. Now, I choose to use one of those, which is the abstract ideal approach.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain how the abstract ideal grounds morality?
It's the same way as a perfect triangle. Like there is an objectively the case that a triangle has 3 sides and they're perfectly straight sides. It's an objective thing. We don't get an opinion on it. We can't opinion triangles.
Actually, yeah, this is actually probably a good thing to talk about. Okay, could you describe? Okay, so you based it. So essentially what you're saying is that okay, so if morality is like a triangle, we're comparing it to the perfect triangle or whatever. If we're trying to create a better triangle. Now you talk about in your secular objective morality, you talk about the best of all possible worlds, and that's what you use as a comparison towards like that's basically what you use as your yardstick towards measuring if we're like moving towards a better world or not, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now, I guess my point regarding your moral system, which you've touched on a little bit towards the beginning when Adam asked you to talk about it, but I've watched the whole video. I don't know if there's a lot more to it than that. I think that I guess I'm trying to figure out how you create an objective moral system from just looking at so like you're still you still haven't okay, so if you have the best of possible worlds, you still need some sort of normative claim saying that we should move towards the best of all possible worlds.
No, I don't actually make the normative claim we should move towards the best of all possible worlds. It's just a descriptive claim saying this is the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah, but if you're trying to create a moral system out of that, you're not creating a moral system. There's zero moral, you're saying you're creating a moral system with no normative claims at all.
Right, I'm getting rid of the oughts. These are just descriptive claims. I'm saying that morality is a description of the best of all possible worlds and a description of whether or not we're moving way towards it or away from it. So I'm getting rid of the oughts. That's my solution.
Morality is a description of the best of all possible worlds?
Correct.
Okay, I mean that's not how you defined it in your video when you were talking about this. I mean, you're like,
right. The introduction to morality. Morality is how we determine what is right and wrong. And
can you give us the definition that you started with, Drew?
Yeah, morality is the principles or criteria used to judge what is right or wrong. You're talking about normativity here. You're not talking about descriptions of the universe.
Correct. And then when I go deeper into it, I explain the way we determine what is right or wrong is we make a comparison to the best of all possible worlds.
But you're making no normative claims as we shouldn't move towards that necessarily?
Correct. It's just a descriptive claim. It's saying what is right and what is wrong is a descriptive claim of what is.
So why are you using the term morality here then? You're not actually, it's not a morality. You're just talking about descriptions of the universe.
Morality is not defined concretely. There is no solution to objective morality yet. There isn't an agreed upon solution. It's not a solved problem.
There may not be an objective solution to it.
But that means that it's open-ended what we can define as it or not. There are certain kinds of things which Dan Dennett calls strange inversions of reasoning, where we take what seems to be the case and we change it in some really drastic way to get to a better answer, like what quantum mechanics did and what Einstein did with general relativity and saying space-time can bend, and what Darwin did by saying complex things can come from simple things. So what I'm doing is counterintuitive. I agree with that. I am detaching the normative we oughts from morality and just making a descriptive claim, and that's my solution to the is-ought problem. So it's my.
That's not a solution to the is-ought.
It is actually a solution to the problem.
It's not, because if you the is-ought.
I'm more qualified to you on this.
I agree. No, look, the is-ought distinction is a problem because you're not solving the is-ought problem by just talking about the ises. That's not a solution. That's just saying I'm only going to talk about half this conversation.
No,
Drew, can you define? Drew, can you define the is-ought problem for the audience who might not know?
Well, yeah, the idea is that you can't get a descriptive claim from a normative claim, which is which is basically saying that you can't say, you can't say that the
you can't get an ought from an is.
Yeah, the idea is you can't say just because something is, you ought to do something. You need some sort of moral framework in between to get you between those two things. And
Right.
he's saying he's solved the is ought problem because he's only talking about is. That's not a solution. You're just talking about half the problem.
No, that's exactly a solution. In philosophy, if the problem doesn't apply to your moral claim, then you've solved the problem because it's no longer a problem for your moral problem.
But you've redefined moral here as just descriptions of the universe.
Correct. That's my solution to the is ought problem. That works. It's called a strange inversion of reasoning. There is a basis for that in philosophy. You can do that.
Okay. You're like, look, you are redefining morality here. And
Correct, because there is no objective definition of morality. There is not a correct definition, which means we can do that and try.
Sure. I mean, you can define it however you want. I'm just saying that what you're talking about is not what 99% of people consider to be morality. And so, like, what I'm saying is we're talking
authority thing.
No. Hey, you're mischaracterizing what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's right that morality should be defined this way because everybody thinks it that way. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're having a conversation over here, and you're having a conversation over here. We're not talking about the same thing. I have one picture in my mind when I'm having this conversation. You have a different picture in your mind when we're having this conversation.
Drew, can you explain to us the two visions of morality, his vision and the one that you say most people are using?
Yeah, his vision is So his vision is essentially, he's defining morality as essentially descriptive claims about the universe in comparison to the best possible world. Correct? Is that I want to make sure I'm not okay. What most people think about morality is we're talking about normative claims about behavior. It's sometimes people talk about like in the context of a group of people. We're talking about ought claims in the context of sometimes a group, but we're really talking about human behavior, or maybe even conscious behavior if you want to not limit it to humans. So like what you're talking about is why are you using the word morality? I'm not sure what
it's a better use for morality. Your use for morality is flawed and incomplete, and it makes problems, and it's completely incoherent. My use is more accurate and works better to describe what morality actually is.
Okay.
Tom, can you give us your definition of morality again? Drew said it twice, but I don't know that we've heard you say it, Tom.
Mm-hmm. So there's the definition. Morality is the principles we use to describe what is right and wrong. And then the principles I use to describe what is right and wrong is the description of the best of all possible worlds.
So it's not necessarily the rights and wrongs, but it's a system of describing those rights and wrongs.
Correct.
So like if commonly people make the claim like murder is wrong, and they want to say that is an objective claim. You're not saying that claim is objective. You're saying that your system to illuminate that claim is what's objective.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Drew, you're saying you're using a more. I'm using
a traditional definition of morality, because I think when you have the title of a conversation called morality, people come to watch that conversation because they think you're talking about a subject.
And what is that traditional view of morality? Like this, you're saying the set of rules that
I'm saying morality objective. Is the principles or criteria used to judge what is right and wrong. There may be stuff you want to add in, I'm fine, but it is somewhere in that universe when we're talking about morality.
No, the definition you're using is specifically contingent on actions done by beings or consciousnesses, right? Because I'm using the same definition that morality is the criteria we use to determine what is right and wrong. My morality does that. The difference between our definitions is that yours is contingent on actions done by beings, and mine is
okay, that's a good clarification. Could you actually describe to me how you could determine something is right or wrong within your definition of morality?
The same way all moral systems do, with moral intuition and moral progress as a guide.
Can you give me a single example?
Our society today is more moral than societies in the past because we allow acceptance of LGBT community when we didn't before. We don't burn witches. We don't put people in slavery because of the color of their skin.
Why are those things bad though?
Because of moral intuition and moral progress. That's how we define.
So you're saying okay.
That's our experience of morality. It's like we.
So you're just talking. So you're talking about our intuitions informing morality.
Yes, that's how epistemically we get to an understanding of morality.
Okay, so you're okay with Ted Bundy's intuitions being moral?
No, Ted, but we all humans, the way morality is justified by theists and atheists in ethics is we use moral intuition, moral progress as how we discover morality. It's kind of like gravity. We see gravity because things fall, and we say, well, this is something, and we're going to have to describe this something. So moral intuition, moral progress is how everyone in ethics uses as the grounds to say there is such a thing as morality.
Wait, okay, so moral progress. Could you? I'm sorry. There's a lot of could you please describe me moral progress in a world where we're just describing things?
Moral progress is something in this world that we have now. It's
Okay.
true of just something we observe, like gravity. Gravity falls. It's independent of my theory of the best of all possible worlds. Moral progress in philosophy is the description that we see the modern societies as having progressed morally and become morally superior to past societies. For example, by being more accepting of the LGBT community, not
Okay.
imprisoning people by the color of their skin.
By what
rights
metric? By what metric are you saying that we're better than we were before?
You would have to ask the philosophers and just Google Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy moral progress, because that's the philosophy. That's not me. That's not my definition.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that we've made progress, okay, compared to the way we used to be.
That's the definition in philosophy of moral progress. Yes.
But why is it progression? Why is
Go,
slavery?
go ask the philosophers.
Okay,
That's
so
philosophical
I'm
question. It's
I'm
not
I'm
relevant
asking
to
you
my
a
knowledge.
question about your position, and you're telling
This
me
is
to go
not my
talk to
position.
somebody.
This is not my position. This is a definition of philosophy. You have to ask the philosophers that one. This has nothing to do with my position. This is just the grounds of all
Okay.
ethics for all
Basically, okay. This is a very simple question. Why is what used to be worse than today? Because for there to be progress, there has to be some discrepancy between
Again,
the
this
two.
is something in philosophy. This is not my position. This is the modern standardized definition of moral progress comes from the field of philosophy.
I'm not claiming it's your. I'm not.
The philosopher's basis is Google it on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Okay, look, I'm trying to figure out what your I don't care if it's your position. I'm trying to figure out how there's a comparison being made here. Is this something related to your view about the best possible worlds?
No. This is the foundation of all of ethics in every field of philosophy is the moral intuition and moral progress. It is everything in ethics. It's the basis for the theist model of morality. It's basis for the atheist model of morality.
Okay, what prompted you to talk about someone's views other than yourself when I asked you that question? Why are you bringing up somebody else?
What is my basis of? You asked how do I justify something about my basis on how we determine one thing is right or wrong, and I said I use moral intuition and moral progress, which is the same thing that every model of morality uses.
Okay, so it is your position.
Right, it's the basis of every model of morality. But
okay, if it's your position,
I didn't make this up.
It doesn't matter if you made it. If it's your position, explain it. I'm trying to understand what your position is, and you won't explain it. You're telling me to go Google somebody.
Right, because I don't need to explain this. This is philosophy. This is the basis of every field of ethics. If you reject this, you reject ethics. And
okay, give me a justification for saying that now is worse or better.
I don't need to. This is the basis of.
You just said it's about justification.
All of ethics. This is. I don't want to go into a detailed discussion of other philosophers' work. This has been.
You just said it's your position. You just said it's your position.
On the basis of their work. Yes. If you want to know what their work is, go look at their work. This is not contingent on my position specifically. This is contingent on all of ethics. If you want to know something about the entire field of ethics, go research ethics.
Don't philosophers disagree on ethics? Different philosophers have different ethical frameworks.
Yes.
Like on these positions, no, not a single. Other than the people who reject.
What do you mean? Like Bentham and Hume have completely different moral philosophies.
Like every model of morality in ethics, every ethicist bases ethics on moral intuition and moral progress. That's it. Those are the two options. Those are what you got. Every single one of them.
I have a bunch of this is great. This has been a great discussion. We're going on 50 minutes here, and I have a bunch of questions. So I want to give both of you guys a closing argument. And just, I mean, do you have any, Drew? Do you have any questions? I kind of jumped in the middle. I don't want to cut you off if you.
For him?
Yeah, if you're trying to get a question answered.
No, I think. Well, look. I mean, I wanted it to be productive. I don't know. I'm not sure it was productive. Yeah, I hear him on that. When we were actually talking about objective morality and pantheism, I think that those are at least on base. When I asked him questions about other things, I'm not sure that was productive. Once again, I said that I was willing to concede things to have a productive conversation. Like the pantheism thing, I'm fine to concede as long as we can talk about things that I view as productive. But I think it's gotten less productive. Yeah, frankly, I'm not sure that. I don't have any questions. I'm not sure. Like for the last 15 minutes, I'm not sure we.
Tom, do you have any closing questions?
Yeah, the topic of the debate was, can you have an objective morality without a God? And I demonstrated, yes, you can. Here are several ways that you can have an objective morality without a God. When we started talking about my personal subjective interpretation of what objective morality is, we got into the weeds because that's a different topic. The topic was, can you have objective morality without a God? And yes, you obviously can. That was kind of the point. And then if you want to lead into a more complicated discussion about my personal view of objective morality, I'd have to actually prepare all of my stuff there to be ready for that specific conversation, which is not what I was expecting to have. I was just saying,
I was concerned this was going to happen, and I was considering suggesting changing the question, but I felt that would be unfair, because I felt it was going to go this way. As soon as I started looking at your videos, I told Adam before this one, it's like, I think we're going to go into Platonic forms, and he didn't believe me.
I never believe anyone.
No, hey, you should trust my intuitions more, man. Like I understand why this went there, and I like, trust me, I understand what you're doing here.
It's literally the topic.
Look, that's why I said I didn't think it would be fair to suggest to Adam that it was changed. I was preparing for something. I think we were both preparing for different things, frankly.
Well, let's go through questions, and then you guys can do a statement.
Well, just to clarify, if you want to have a more detailed discussion about my model of morality, particularly, we can have a different discussion about that, and I'll prepare for that specifically.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So the first question is PSA Sitch asks, how can objective morality exist if we don't know what happens when we die?
I don't even know how to answer that.
I don't think we need to know how we could die for objective morality to exist. I mean, it's a distinction between epistemology and ontology, how we know things and things existing. Like, if it's true independent of how we existing, it's subjective. And so whether or not we know it is irrelevant. It's objective. Objectivity can exist independent of whether or not we know it.
I agree with that. Yeah.
But if there's information from after death that we aren't privy to, how can we know?
Well, it doesn't matter. Like,
it's objectively true.
Yeah,
or
whether or not we know
not
it.
True that other universes exist. Either they exist or they don't exist. Now, whether or not we know it's irrelevant.
I got you.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if we know or not.
Yeah, Sitch, come on, jeez. It's like the truth is out there.
Was that a serious question, or I think you may have asked that before it started as like kind of a pokey thing.
Sunbro says, I wonder if there is any meaningful distinction between the idea of God and truth. We can't prove truth in a similar manner if we can't prove God. So are truth and God interchangeable?
No, I mean it's. I think therefore I am is an objective truth. I mean, am I God? No,
right.
Those are not the same thing. 1 + 1 = 2 is an objective truth. Is that God? No, they're totally separate things.
Drew, you have a comment?
Yeah, sure. I think that's fine. Okay. Yeah, so, I'm not sure that those things are entirely connected. Yeah, I think that if God exists, there may be some connection between him and the truth, but I don't think that. I think truth can exist without God.
So, question for Drew: how is your moral framework dependent on the existence of God?
I believe that God created a moral framework when he created the universe.
So
does that answer the question?
So it's just dependent on the fact that if there was no God, this framework would have never been created. Is that your argument?
Sure.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. No. If God doesn't exist, I don't believe that there are morals.
So Tom, a question for you: how do you enforce your ethics without a God?
You don't. It's not about ethics. It's a description. It's just describing what the best of the possible worlds is. It's not actually forcing us to do it. There's no enforcement there.
So this is the equivalent of setting up a game. Don't all games need some sort of referee though?
Well, they need rules, but you don't have to follow the rules. You just be not following the rules. So if you don't follow my rules, it would just mean you're not being moral. There's no punishment there. You're just not a moral person.
Right. Okay. Writer John Buck says, question for TJump. If morality is like a law of nature, such as gravity, does this not violate Hume's guillotine? Hume's guillotine has to do with the is-ought distinction that we were arguing about. And I think is a description of the world, like facts are ises, and oughts tend to be values, like I ought not to murder
Prescriptive
people.
claims.
Yeah, prescriptive claims. So, does it does your system violate Hume's guillotine?
No, because if morality is a law of nature, then it is descriptive. It's describing something that exists in the world. It's not a prescriptive anymore.
What?
Yeah. He's completely redefining it. It has nothing to do with normativity, from what I understand.
Right.
Yeah, it's just not.
It would still be normative. It just wouldn't be prescriptive. Normative just means applies to everyone equally.
Okay, we're operating under different. I'm just normative is essentially the way that you're using prescriptive is under the definition I'm using. Yeah, I was taught differently. That's fine. It doesn't matter. We're not disagreeing here. It's just a disagreement between
Different
definitions.
terms.
Yeah.
Writer John Buck, question for Drew: is free choice necessarily for morality?
Is free choice necessary for morality?
Yes. A la ought implies can.
Yeah, I think that if you can't choose, then I think that, I think that I'm not sure how you would create a moral system about what you ought to do if you can't choose behavior. Just in a practical sense, I don't want. I'm not going to go in it for. I would have to think about it more, but my baseline intuition is that if you can't choose otherwise, there's no point in talking about what people ought to do because they can't do otherwise.
The writer John Buck is in the chat asking, and I think this is directed at Tom, and it's a question I have too. What is the morality describing? If you're saying that your moral system is just a descriptive system, what is it describing?
The best of all possible worlds for all possible wills.
So the best of all possible worlds for all possible players in that world?
Essentially, yeah. All possible wills, like beings.
So this is a Matrix type situation.
No, it's not like a Matrix situation. It's like people actually have their own universe. It doesn't have to be like a simulation.
Yeah, a Matrix is one possibility way to describe it, like an analogy.
Well, I'm just saying, like in the physical universe that we live in, a lot of times one person's desires come at the expense of another person. And that is the problem of morality is.
Right. We would need to live in a completely different world to be able to achieve this best of all possible worlds. We don't live in the best of all possible worlds right now.
Right. But you're saying that is the objective morality. That is what we should.
Yes. That's the objective standard, is the best of all possible worlds.
Writer John Buck says, question for Tom: if naturalistic pantheism is true and the universe is not conscious, does that mean that conscious creatures such as ourselves are not part of the universe?
No. So like you can be, my hand is not conscious, but it's still a part of me. Like it doesn't need to be like this camera is not conscious, but it's not a part of me either. So you can have consciousness as individual subsets of a bigger whole and not have it be the whole. Like,
just to add on to that, I don't think that the universe we currently live in is conscious. So I don't think that, I doubt that the universe itself is conscious that we're living. So just because the universe that we live in is likely unconscious doesn't mean that it affects our consciousness necessarily.
Or the existence of God.
We're talking about the universe as like an entity, from what I understand.
right.
Not
It's a composition division fallacy, if you want to.
It's not like there's no consciousness in the universe. It's that the universe itself is not conscious, is what he's saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Tom, you had mentioned that you can have multiple objective moral systems. How is that possible?
You can't have multiple objective moral systems at the same time. They can't like all exist in the same universe. There can only be one at a time, but there are different possibilities of what that might be. So it's like there can't be multiple all-powerful beings. There can only be one all-powerful being, but there are different candidates for what the all-powerful being might be. Maybe it's Yahweh, maybe it's Brahman, maybe it's the Thor or Zeus or whatever. There's lots of different possibilities of what it might be, but there can only be one of them which is actually true.
Gotcha. Drew, what essential element does God interject to make morality objective?
I would say primarily the work is being done by the all-powerful piece.
Can you elaborate on that?
Is he talking about the essential elements of God? What is the question again? Could you rephrase that?
What essential element or property does God interject into moral systems to make a moral system objective, to make a moral system, the rules of the moral system objectively right or wrong?
Let me rephrase that a little bit. How
Yeah.
is God's morality different from one that I make up? Why
Well,
is
God is God.
Yeah, why? Why? Explain that. Don't just say God is God. More. Give me more
Well,
detail.
God is different than we are. He's omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipresent, all those things. We're not those things.
And so those things make his morality objective where ours wouldn't be.
No, all I'm saying about the objective versus subjective in terms of God is that I believe he could make subjective problems objective by declaring them so. He's all powerful. I believe he could do that.
Okay, so it's because he's all powerful, he can make
Yeah.
subjective claims
That's
objective.
that's why I conceded on the pantheism thing, because
All right.
I think the work is being done by the all powerful part. Yeah.
So last question for Tom. You mentioned intuition a lot and moral progress. What is the difference between intuition, human intuition, and revelation?
Well, revelation is like something given to you from some external source, usually. Intuition is just a feeling you have when you see something. So intuition could be a revelation. Like there was a mathematician, Ramanujan, who claimed that all his math was a revelation from the Hindu gods. But intuition is usually not considered to be a revelation. They're usually considered separate things, even though they could be potentially the same thing.
Could you repeat the question one more time, Adam?
What is the difference between intuition and revelation? He's said, Tom has said many times in this debate that morality is formed through this moral progress that has to do with human intuition, and it just seems to me, I don't know. He's saying human intuition. I feel like the theists are constantly saying divine revelation, and I feel like they're talking about the same thing.
I think the question is about what's the difference between like these two lines of thinking. I don't think he means literally what's the difference between these two words. Did you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Intuition is something we can measure. Revelation is something we can't. Revelation is assumed. Intuition is demonstrated.
Why can't we measure revelation in the same way? If a theist says that my moral intuition is a revelation from God, and they write that revelation out, and it either is successful or not successful. I mean, you're talking about moral progress in the same way, right?
No, you're saying this thing was caused by this other thing. So you have to demonstrate the other thing. So you say, I have this feeling which was caused by God.
Right.
It's like saying that cup was knocked over by that person. You have to demonstrate the connection between those two things. Whereas intuition is just saying that cup was knocked over. Like we can observe the thing, the cup being knocked over, but we can't observe it was knocked over by that other thing specifically. There's the two aspects in revelation, whereas there's only the one in intuition.
And what you mean by the moral progress is that we're moving more towards your Platonic morality?
No, moral progress has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with philosophy. Just you can Google moral progress, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It is the general impression we have that modern societies are more moral than past societies. That's what moral progress is defined as in philosophy.
Can I ask you a question? Actually, is why did you bring up the moral progress bit in this conversation? I'm having a hard time I know I asked you a question. I can't remember why it came up specifically.
I don't remember what your exact question was either, but it was something about what is my grounds to believe that something is moral or something is right or wrong or something like that. Like, how do we tell the difference? I think it was something about Ted Bundy. Like, why do we say Ted Bundy's intuition?
Yeah, it's like, why do we say his intuitions are any different than yours?
Right, and so I'm using the same criteria that is used in moral intuition, moral progress, or as moral intuition, moral progress, which is how we determine there is such a thing as morality. That's why I brought it up.
Okay, yeah, I guess I was just confused why you brought it up and then like wouldn't really even talk about it.
Well, I think this has been a fascinating discussion. I notice when I'm not actually debating, I can pay a lot more attention to what both people are saying. So I mean, I got a lot out of it. I think there was a lot of interesting discussion in the chat as well. I'm going to give you both a closing statement, and then I'll do some housekeeping at the end with my dates and whatnot. So do you want to go? Do you want to go first, Tom? And we'll give Drew the last word since he began.
Yeah, sure. So my initial interpretation of the question tonight was, can morality be objective without a God? And my goal was just to demonstrate, yes, it can be. Here are different ways to do that. And that was my attempt in this discussion, why I brought up Platonic object and the undiscovered law of nature and those kind of things. And I just want to thank you guys for coming on. Thanks, Adam, for inviting me. I really appreciated the discussion. It was really enjoyable. And I'll let you go.
Yeah, so I'll reflect the same thanks. I think regardless of how in the weeds we got, I think that it was a good conversation. I think that there was obviously a miscommunication about what the conversation was going to be about because um, I think that as soon as I reread the question as we got closer to the debate, I was like, oh crap. I think I know where this is going, and it's not where I thought it was going. I think that I think it was productive nonetheless. We had some sort of substantive discussion towards the middle. Um, I think that definitely it would have been more interesting had we talked about secular objective morality and the difference between moralities grounded in the idea of God rather than some sort of secular moral framework. But I completely understand that that was not the question. Um, I think that typically when this conversation comes up on the internet, it's typically that debate. It's the debate between theists and anti-theists, or just atheists, about the difference between, or if it can there be objective morality without believing in God in a different way than this conversation took place. But uh, I understand why you were wanting to stay on topic. So I want to say that even though I felt like it wasn't as productive as it could have been if we had that discussion, I understand why you were staying on topic, because it would be not fair for us to veer off on another topic if you had prepared for something that was clearly the topic of the debate, right? So yeah, I guess that's all I'll say. Thanks for
We can
everybody sticking
always,
through it.
yeah, we can always tweak the question and do a round two. That's always a possibility. I'm committed to doing a debate a week on Wednesdays, same time, same place. So, and I'm getting interesting offers from people. So you can always DM me on Twitter, which is about the best way to get a hold of me. I read the comments too. You can leave a comment below. So I next week am going to be debating close to this topic, because we're going to be talking about, is secular morality better than Christian morality? I'm actually going to be debating that Christian morality is better than secular morality. I'm going to be debating Sarah. I don't know if it's Sarah Michelle or Sarah Michael. So I think it's Sarah Michael. So I'll be debating her next Wednesday, July 17th. I'll be debating Kent Hovind on Wednesday, July 24th, on Can Evolution Explain Morality? That question may be tweaked a little bit, but it'll definitely have to do with evolution and morality. So that's all for this week. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you in the next video.